Today on the Unveil Podcast, I have the privilege of sitting down with Mark Divine. Mark is an entrepreneur, New York Times bestselling author, philanthropist, and one of the world's top leadership and coaching experts. After a successful 20-year career as a Navy SEAL and SEAL commander, Mark was hired by the Navy to create a nationwide coaching and leadership program for the SEALs. The bold goal of this program was to give the SEALs the best leadership and mental management tools in the world to help them forge unbeatable SEAL teams that achieve mission success in the most stressful, challenging environments on Earth. This conversation covers some of that, and more of Mark's bio can be found in our show notes. But today's conversation is much more about the work that infuses everything that Mark does and his passion for personal development, in the sense that being in tune with who you are can transform how you lead and also the impact you're here to have on the world. Mark's bio is phenomenal, but his conversation and his thinking and his way of seeing the evolution of consciousness and how impactful we can all be, and his definition of the mind, these are all second to none. I really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, as you will tell from just digging into this world of Mark Divine and how much there are similarities around the nodes and the people that are currently moving into leadership in the way of evolution of consciousness. I really hope that you enjoy this conversation. It is not the one I was expecting to have, and it was infinitely better for it. I loved chatting to Mark and picking his brain on what he sees is happening in the world right now and where we're all moving towards. I would hope that you go and find the show notes, read all of Mark's books, find him, follow his programs, follow his podcast. All of the resources that you need are in our show notes. And with that, let's get straight to the interview with Mark Divine. So welcome to the Unveil Podcast, Mark Divine. I am so delighted that you're here, and I cannot wait to share your wisdom and your vast expertise with my listeners. But let's start, for those who don't know about you, haven't heard or read one of your many books. Would you like to just give us the 30,000-foot view of who you are? And the question that I love to ask is how you serve.
I love that. So I serve, I have two overarching kind of guideposts. I mean, it's a single North Star, but it has like two very strong streams, right, coming off of it. One is this relentless pursuit of my own evolution, right, as a practice of becoming more whole. And simultaneously serving others in humanity by expanding consciousness, by bringing tools and methodologies for growth and integrated development to people who may not necessarily come to these in other means or forms. Not to say that these tools and practices are mine or created by me, but maybe contextualized and articulated and simplified and brought to people through through a way that they can kind of latch onto. So that's kind of like the highest level. Now, if you had asked me 20, 30 years ago, who was Mark Divine, I probably would have had a very different answer.
And I love that, because you kind of headlines of Mark Divine are, retired Navy SEAL, all of the kind of things of your evolution and the unbeatable mind approach. But just digging even below the surface a little bit of all of that, I read all of the things about your yoga and there's a phrase somewhere on your website about laughter is the thing that united troops, and I'm like, this is a dance of different things, which is no surprise to me that you are where you are with this kind of expansion of consciousness and all those sorts of things. And I love that you say, like, 20 years ago there may have been a different answer, because it feels like we're all on an evolving journey. And
For sure.
The people that I'm speaking to at the moment are all at this place. We're thinking about what's happening in the world,
right,
the driving forces behind consciousness and all those sorts of things. And your kind of dual share of the personal journey twinned with the serving others in that way feels very apt.
Yeah, I've heavily influenced through my training in the Eastern arts, right? So I started martial arts training when I was 20 years old with a real grandmaster karate guy who was the founder of this pretty large, traditional karate school called Seido, and he had hundreds of thousands of students worldwide. And I was fortunate enough to train with him at his headquarters in Manhattan. When I graduated from college, I went to Manhattan and got a typical corporate job, and was getting my MBA at Stern School of Business, becoming a CPA, all that kind of stuff. But along the way, I literally almost as soon as I started all that stuff, I started training with him. And it turns out he is a Zen master as well. And so quite unintentionally, I was kind of served up the mentor, right? There was something in me that was ready, or, some spirit guide guided me to this place where suddenly at 20, I was studying Zen meditation and I loved it. And it was very different than anything I experienced for the first 19, 20 years of my life, which was in a very rural town in upstate New York with a pretty chaotic and dysfunctional, but awesome family, which is pretty common, right? Yes. Especially in the United States. And so that was the beginning of my exploration of these ancient techniques to develop the mind and the body and the soul and to integrate. And that, quite frankly, is what cracked my world wide open, right? It changed the nature of my mind, the nature of my reality, my understanding of my world, my understanding that I actually could create my world because my world was my world. And I had never been exposed to that. I didn't articulate it like that, again, 20 years ago, but I was beginning to see that I was living off of patterns and stories and constructs that were force-fed me. In fact, we all are and continue, and we can't get away from them. But meditation is a process of self-awareness to begin to perceive these structures and constructs and mental models and ways of behaving, which are literally spoon-fed you as just utter fact when they're just a story, just an idea. But it's an idea that generally has served somebody, whether it's your parents or whether it's the government or whether it's, some corporate interest, right? Those ideas serve somebody. And then we're just kind of fed them through media, through our education, through the language, through culture, through the various training mechanisms of the mind. And so meditation taught me that I could stand back from that in my mind and create this metacognitive capability to observe those things and then to be able to ask better questions like, oh, is that interesting thought pattern serving me? By the way, I noticed that a lot of my thought patterns were negative, even though I was a happy guy on the outside, but inside I was really shut down and very, very, insular because of the abuse and, alcoholism that kind of ran through my family. And so I was, protected myself from that as a child. So I had to unwind all that. Later on, so that all led me into the SEALs. So here I am. I didn't go into my early 20s thinking I'm trained to be a Navy SEAL. I didn't know anything about the SEALs. The most elite, badass military unit in the world. It was the meditation practice that surfaced this calling in me to be a warrior, or that I was a warrior, and I was heading down the wrong path. Right. And so meditation has this wonderful capacity to first show you the stories that you're living and then help you uncover the real story, which is what you should be living, right? Your passion, your purpose, guided by a strong set of principles that are deeply rooted in universal truths. And those all were exposed to me during the 4 years I was in Manhattan, and it showed me that I was meant to be a warrior. And then I had to go through this process of deconstructing all the stories that had led me down the path to be a, Wall Street multimillionaire and say, okay, that's not it. There's something else. And then that something else was revealed to me to be the SEALs. And then that whole process of getting in was interesting. SEALs were amazing. I wasn't in the SEALs just to go play whack-a-mole and, kill the bad guys and serve my country. I literally was doing it because my spirit said, you're a warrior. This is how you're going to serve. And I just happened to be extremely athletic and, pretty badass guy in a sense in that regard. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all the way, I'm going all in, you know what I mean? And there's a very small band of elite warriors who are calling me. So I'll go do that. But I initially thought, I'll take a run to see how long I can go with it. But within 6 or 7 years, I realized that the organization of the military was too wasn't evolved enough for my spirit, right? You can only grow in an organization pretty much as far as the organization will take you, and then you get stuck
Yeah.
by the rigidity of the organization. And so I love the SEALs, I love the teammates, I love what it meant for me to get me out of away from being a CPA and that kind of merchant path into the warrior, hardcore warrior path. But I recognize that it still wasn't how I was meant to serve for the rest of my life.
Mm. Mm.
And so I left that.
I think that's really interesting. This whole thing is so interesting to me because I think I'm really fascinated by motivation and by what drives us as human beings. And I think it's very easy for me as a woman, as a British woman, to sit on the outside and think everyone who like joins the SEALs just signs up because they have some aggression that they need to get out of them, or there's some kind
Yeah,
of wound pattern
there
that
are
they're kind of
definitely those people for sure.
right. Or it's coming from wounding, and they kind of need to fight somewhere so that they're
Right.
all of those things. I haven't heard, and I'm sure it does exist elsewhere, but this is one of the first times where I read a bit of your story and I felt the kind of more, probably not the right word, but the more spiritual centeredness of it. And I wrote
Hmm.
down, I've got several words on my notepad. I very rarely take notes for podcasts, but I've written warrior as one of the things that was kind of
Hmm.
coming through as I read bits of your story and listened to a few of your interviews. Because it really felt like, as I was reading, this was an emanation out of you rather than an escape. And I think sometimes
That's
that
right.
joining SEALs is not that thing.
Yes, true. I think there are a lot of, let me be fair. It was probably a little bit of both,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's true that a lot of people who join the military are escaping from something. They may be escaping from desperation or some financial lack or need. Or, a lot of them, well, I certainly know in my community, a lot of people come from traumatic childhoods. And so the strength that gives them as a warrior is pronounced, right? And I think there's a lot of beauty in that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the need for discipline and control over your environment, and the military provides that. I mean, I've likened it to being essentially paid to go to prison, because you really lose all your freedom,
Yeah.
and you are in a sense, this sounds horrible, but you're a little bit of a slave, but you're a paid slave. You're more like a
Mm-hmm.
serf, you know what I mean?
Right. Right.
You're a
And for
glorified
some,
serf in a
but
uniform with a weapon.
right. And for some, that must be the first time they've ever really felt safe because it's
And
so
right. And so a lot of
constructed.
people just love that because it becomes their new family.
Yeah.
The family has rules. And, if you get in trouble, they'll take care of you. At least they used to. And now it's getting harder and harder, right? They put you out to
Mm-hmm.
dry sometimes now.
Mm.
Um, and so some people just absolutely love that. One of my models that I, you know, really has helped inform my thinking for my training program called Unveil Mind is, the adult development models that show that, human beings progress through these different stages of development. So I have a simplified version of the 8 stages of development called the 5 plateaus.
Mm-hmm.
The 5 plateaus are, first is survivor, second is protector, third is the achiever, the expert and achiever. The fourth um, is the pluralist or equalizer, the do-gooder, and then the fifth is the integrator. And so, what we're really striving to do through development is to get to the integrated stage of development where we've healed all the traumas from our past. We've opened up to the perspectives and opened up our heart center, and so we have great care and compassion for all beings. That's at the integrated level. It doesn't mean that you lose these prior levels, but you can operate in them and with other people who are at those levels gracefully, not
Mm-hmm.
triggered into a negative way. Like for instance, COVID, everyone snapped into survivor mode. Some people snapped into it with fear and overwhelm, right? And some people were already in fear and overwhelm, and COVID just buried them. Or, if you're operating at an integrated level, you can kind of go down there and say, okay, listen, this is activating some of my survival energy and instincts and that plateau of consciousness. So how am I going to navigate it gracefully? How am I going to be, the person who's going to be the the helper, the healer, the guide, this,
Mm-hmm.
help others through this situation to help
Mm-hmm.
myself,
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, the reason I bring this up is the institutions also have these levels, right? And so there
Yeah.
are institutions that are at a survival level. And that could be like the flailing, organization like FTX in the cryptocurrency world, which has gone bankrupt, and the whole crypto industry is got a, is in a little bit of survivor mode, thinking, what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
It's not going away. It's just, it's just another wave of cleansing and
Yeah.
whatnot. Or the gangs, let's say gangs, or they're very much in a survival kind of pattern. Institutions that are in the protector level with the second stage of consciousness are really the bureaucratic institutions that have large budgets, large populations of technocrats to operate them, and their whole energy is to protect
Mm-hmm.
their status quo, protect their careers, protect their job, protect their industry, protect everything. And so that was what the military was. It's a
Right.
protector. Now the
Got it.
Navy SEALs are also achievers, right? We're highly entrepreneurial, so we have this kind of push pull energy in the SEALs, which is why we end up being we kind of piss off the regular conventional military,
Yes.
because like we're super entrepreneurial, we work well in tiny little teams,
Yeah.
and we don't like to wear the uniforms, and we like to we like to flaunt that actually.
Yeah. Mm.
So that's the achiever in us. But every once in a while, the protector side just tucks you back in and makes sure that everything is, go too far off the reservation.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself, as because of my Zen training, I blasted through. I was already in kind of through the survivor mode, which was my family of origin, into the protector mode, which was protecting the family values and the Judeo-Christian values that I grew up with, which are all very good, but that's all protector level stuff. Into the achiever level when I went into the SEALs, and then the meditation pushed me through the equalizer, and I began to experience the integrator level within the first, maybe like 5 to 6 years after my meditation journey began.
Mm.
And so the more I experienced those higher stages of consciousness and had experiences that were so outside the traditional norm,
Mm.
the more I questioned. And then I began to deconstruct the next level of things.
Mm.
Right. And that led me to like, okay, what's really going on here? What's really important? And I had met my wife after I went and graduated SEAL training. And then we got married a few years later. And, I remember quite painfully going through this period of time where within 6 months of being married, I was gone for like 5 of those months.
Mm.
And I was asking these questions and having conversation with her. I said, you know what, this structure, this rigidity of this military structure is really painful right now. Because what I'm feeling is like I want freedom, and I want freedom for what? Freedom for love to flow,
Mm.
not just first between us as human beings and this family that we're building, but also um, I want more love to flow in my life, and I want to bring more love. And I didn't use that word, but I very strongly believe that's what I was experiencing and expressing.
Mm.
Because once you open your heart, like you can't shut it back down again, right? And
No.
and it's very hard to have that open heart, love flowing kind of consciousness in a very rigid, bureaucratic structure that is basically built for war.
Mm.
So so the evolution of my warrior journey went from the warrior athlete to the warrior leader to like, oh wow, I'm more of like a warrior sage, and I still believe in that warrior energy. But now what it means to me is the warrior is just like you. It's someone who's willing to stand for something you believe strongly in and to take action around it in spite of the consequences, in
Mm.
spite of what people might think or say about you.
Mhm. Mm.
Right? The warrior is the woman who will protect her child, you know, against at great risk to her life.
Mhm.
And the warrior is the individual who will say and do what he believes is right based upon insight and wisdom, not
Mm.
rational thinking,
Mhm.
but then stand his ground.
Mhm.
And so like martyrs are warriors, Jesus was a warrior,
Mhm. Mm.
even though people would think that he's the opposite of warrior. And I said, no, no, actually, the energy of the warriors doesn't have to do with fighting. It has to do with doing what's right.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because the energy, the archetypes underneath, sometimes in the English language we get the meaning wrong because we
That's right.
attach it to things, but the energy underneath it, it moves through the examples that you've given, and
Right.
this kind of warrior sage archetype I love. It feels very, very kind of grounded and very leading by example, which is,
Yeah.
you know, it's the way of the warrior, and
It
feels
is the
deficient.
example. This is why, Victoria, when I said, you could say, the first question you asked, who are you? The guiding principle for me are self-mastery in service, hand in glove, right? So the warrior is also committed to mastery.
Yes.
And so that they can serve, right? Whereas a lot of people get that backwards. They go out and try to serve, but they don't try to master themselves. And so their service comes from a lower plateau or a lower level of energy. It's transactional. It's done to look good. You know, it's virtue signaling.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. And so mastery precedes service, and then they become the same thing because you master yourself through your service at an integrated level, and it's one and the same. So when I get up in the morning and I train in meditation or yoga, I'm serving others because I'm creating a better world in my mind. My mind is refining my concept of my world, and that means that every interaction I have where I intersect with other people's worlds is in service to them because it's going to be a different quality of experience.
I run a coach training academy, and it's basically a year of helping people to master their own
That's
selves,
awesome. Yeah.
to be better people for themselves first and foremost. And it's almost, I start by saying, I don't care if you never become a coach at the end of this and never become this holistic healing professional, because you doing your thing is what empowers your role in this life. And I have a team here at the clinic that I run, and there's just this essence of leading by example. Doesn't mean follow me. It just means I'm going to work as hard on myself as I would expect anyone else to, because me mastering my own world, my mind, my emotions, my heart, my capacity to remain open to love, all of those things make me a better leader.
That's right. My experience is the more I have gone inward to train my mind, the more expansive my concept of mind becomes. And ultimately, I think at the highest levels, the mind takes ownership, not ownership in a, in a sense of like transactional ownership, but it takes ownership of the totality of reality. It says, this is my world. This is my mind, and it couldn't not be, right? The proof is when you wake up in the morning, you open your eyes, there's the world. The world wakes up to you. You don't wake up to the world. And so therefore, every thought, every action, every intention, right, you recognize has an effect, has an impact on this world that you see out there. But then, of course, there's all these other beings in this world, and they're having their own experience of the world. This is where you get co-creation, right? And so, like, in a very simple kind of proof of this theory is if you enter, if you wake up to your world, if the world wakes up to you and you decide that it's going to be an amazing day, and you decide that you're going to bring love into every interaction and forgiveness and light, then all the interactions you have are joyful and playful. Right? You just don't have those angry, negative interactions. But if you wake up to the world and you think the world is out there to get you, right? And it's a big danger zone, and you got to navigate all these dangers throughout the day and guard yourself and freaking arm yourself to go out and deal with the day. Then guess what? You go out and you find that the world is out to get you. And there's going to be people trying to drive you off the road, and there's going to be people flipping you off because you cut them off, and there are going to be people who piss you off because they cut in front of you in the line at the grocery store. You're going to attract all sorts of interactions that are going to prove your mind's view that this world is out to get you.
And I'm interested, what do you say to people who, when you share that, they're like, oh, it isn't as simple as a decision, or, their nervous system's giving them the messages that like life is threatening. What's your route through for those people? Is it just a training?
The only route through is to investigate that for yourself.
Right.
Don't listen to my words. I mean, words, if the words inspire you to do the investigation, great. But the proof, like this is why like I think our materialistic centric, scientific community is like a self-licking ice cream cone, right? They literally, the observer bias is everywhere, and they
Right.
find exactly what they're looking for because they're not looking for the right things. They're not asking the right questions, and they're looking at this world as out there and out to get you. And so they want to prove that it's out there and it's out to get you.
Yeah.
When you begin the process of mental development, mental training through simple practices such as box breathing or breath control, concentration training, becoming mindful of your thoughts or metacognitively aware of the quality of your thoughts, and then recognizing that you are not those thoughts. And then you turn inward and look for what the true nature of reality is. If you're not these thoughts, then the next natural conclusion is you're not this body either. And if you're not this body, you're not these thoughts, then you lead to the perennial question, well, then who am I? Right? And some of the greatest yogis settled on that as the ultimate question, right? Ramana Maharshi, Nisargadatta, Maharaj, others. Who am I if I'm not the body and I'm not my thoughts? And that's what I'm talking about, the nature of the mind. You get to, and you say beyond the personality mind is this just overall consciousness. And there's my consciousness of the world, and there's everyone else's consciousness in the world, which co-creates the world moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. And then even beyond that, there's this pure ground of being, what you call awareness or source or God, I guess would be another term for that. The ground of awareness that just will let you know that you are alive because, it's just ever present unfolding beyond thought. And so those all link. And so the process of turning inward takes you from body to the personal mind, then recognizing this personal mind actually is just part of the story. And the personal part is not the whole. And I can separate from that. That happens through mindfulness training. And then you turn the light of your awareness or your concentrated effort inward, looking for the light itself. And then you find the totality of consciousness. And then you find the witness, which is at the pivot point of the doorway to awareness. And then through even more sustained surrender, you can move beyond. I think that process, that practice, once you begin that practice, first of all, it becomes like more and more imperative and important to you because you begin to experience the truth of what I'm saying. And it has to be an individual N=1 study.
Yeah.
Because everyone's in their own world. Right. I can't, there are some shared experiences that I can co-create with my clients, like an intense hour-long breathing experience. Everyone has a similar physiological experience and things are happening in their brain, and we can kind of generally correlate what people are experiencing, but in their mind, everyone's having a radically different world going on.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because when I read some of your book, and I have a thing about mindset work when it's just personality mindset work. So I was reading, like, you go in with the unbeatable mind, and instantly I was like, oh, we're not talking about that mind. We're talking, because you lead with like box breathing, and I'm like, oh, okay. We're not in the realm of like normal mindset hacking. It's not just think differently.
I love that you brought that up, Victoria, because I have some friends who, of course, because of this podcast and, etc. People consider me an influencer, and I'm like, well, sort of. I'm a teacher. I'm not an influencer, but so they're in the hacking community, and I think that they are squarely in the performance. I am a body set, right? Materialistic. I am the body, and so therefore, I'm going to do these things to hack my body and to make my body more effective, so I can perform better, and therefore I can look better, and therefore I can make more money, and therefore I'm happier. And I'm in the opposite camp. I'm in the mind camp. I said, I'm not this body. And I use my mind to evolve to higher stages of awareness. And those higher stages of awareness lead to simplicity and contentment and peace of mind and peace, peacefulness, love. And from that place, my body, mind, personality will fulfill its service spontaneously.
Mhm.
It will just
Mhm.
happen, right? And
Mhm.
I'm still working on that. I'm not saying I'm there. There is no there. It's actually the every day is the journey, and that's the joy, and that's the
Mhm.
bliss. Every day
Mhm.
is every moment. That's what that's the there,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
There's no destination. Whereas in the material world, you're always working toward a destination. So you're never in the present moment because there's always some better future, always trying to hack your way to a better future or build something, be the next unicorn, the next fucking, next author. I almost said a word that I shouldn't have said. The next author. That's the
It's
old
all right.
Navy SEAL in me.
Yeah. We put the explicit warning on for these reasons.
Yeah, that's the old Navy SEAL.
But I love that
Anyway,
you
so
led with simplicity, because there's a reason my company in this podcast is called the Unveil Podcast. We're not about like what can I add into my system, what hack, what tool, what trick. And I'm
right,
in the health optimization field. I can buy a hack and add as many devices as I want, and I'm still in the know what's underneath, what's behind, what's the motivation, but also what is there when there's just pure awareness, when you can just
right.
be with what is and be in total contact with reality right now.
Hmm.
That's more real than any kind of additive technique,
For
etc.
sure. Yeah. And that's the problem with that materialistic approach is you just keep on adding and adding and adding. And it takes more and more time and you think, oh, if I miss this technique or that pill or supplement, and then it kind of controls your life.
Mm,
And
mhm,
if you just practice going inward and finding that stillness and then let that stillness br- bring the wisdom which is beyond knowledge.
mm,
The hacking community is looking for knowledge and it worships knowledge. And when I'm talking about wisdom is recognizing that just naming something and learning how to name something and to know something more doesn't bring wisdom. It doesn't bring insight and it doesn't bring peace of mind and contentment and love. What it
mm,
does is it just packs more knowledge, which then inflates the ego sense of knowingness as a thinker. And
mhm,
I'm trying to move beyond the thinker.
mhm. With
So
that said, though, I mean, you feel like you're an incredibly deep thinker. Maybe a deep contemplator is probably a more accurate way of saying it, or a
yeah.
deep feeler. I
Back
kind of
to why words are so limiting for us, right, Victoria? In
right.
fact, that's one of the major constructs when you start to do this self-awareness. You see that how language shapes us
Yes,
and shapes you know the structure of your brain is basically the language.
the
And if
language.
you speak multiple languages, then that's cool because now you have these kind of like your brain is more malleable, right? You can
Hmm.
use different languages to think and articulate, but
Mm,
ultimately awareness is beyond language
mm,
because even that
yeah.
is a structure, right? It's
Yes.
something that limits you, right? This is
Hmm.
kind of the idea of duality versus non-duality. Like language is in duality, and
Hmm.
naming something and parsing it down into an answer, but is a realm of duality, and pure awareness is beyond that.
Hmm. Mm,
And we live in both. It's not
hmm.
like you have to
Hmm.
find one or the other. Like
Yeah.
you live in both.
Yeah.
It's just most people don't recognize the awareness piece.
Hmm.
They're so focused and trained and entrained into the I am the body and I am these thoughts and my knowledge is right.
Hmm.
Everything is so it becomes a trap actually.
Hmm. Yes. And I'm a deep student of the ancient I Ching, the ancient Chinese I Ching, and
Yeah,
the 60-second gate speaks to this. It's all about the detail of language and how it can give you definition in the humanness, but also is
mhm,
very limiting because it's a constriction. And as soon as you apply a constriction, you aren't free to flow.
that's
So
right. Well
yeah.
said. I love that.
Hmm.
I have never studied the I Ching. I've had that. I've been the kind of person who's scanned through it and found some inspiration in it. But
Yeah.
I was drawn more to the Vedic principles. But I think that's brilliant. Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I ended up there with the study of human design and all sorts of self-analysis things, but it's all archetypal. It's all the underneath, but it is the description of humanness.
Right.
And then there's the beyond. It's always alluding to the beyondness, the consciousness. And that's actually where I was going to take us, because it feels like you feel on the edge to me, on the not on the edge of anything, but like you feel like you're pushing the kind of perspective of this evolution of consciousness. And there's this kind of perception you have of where reality currently is, where the current state of the world is. And I'd be interested in you just sharing anything that's coming up when I say like the state of the world at the moment and where we're all going. And you mentioned COVID and the recent crypto
Hmm.
stuff. I'd love to get your feel on everything as we're standing right now.
I had at the level of awareness and consciousness, there are, there are more and more people who are awakening, who are moving into that integrated level of consciousness, and also who are being born more evolved, right? Because they had more perfected lives, or they were at that evolutionary stage. So I believe that the overall conscious level, and I think the internet had a lot to do with this, right? The timing, because of the spread and diffusion of information and training and wisdom traditions. So we're at a time where consciousness is growing, and I mean by that it's evolving vertically, if you want to use it. It's not really a hierarchical scale, but it's evolving to higher stages of development, which are more inclusive and which are more compassionate and more open and heart centric. And so the work you're doing, the work I'm doing, and others, it's all part of that. We're like a team of teams or tribe of tribes, all helping and working toward expanding consciousness. And that expansion of consciousness leads to a higher order of thinking.
Mm.
And that order of thinking is looking at, humans as all one instead of separate, looking at the earth as integrated and integral and like a part and parcel of our life experience. We can't live without the earth. And so then you see this played out in a lot of really, really cool social entrepreneurial programs, a lot of initiatives which are not the same as the industrial information age initiatives or structures, which were nonprofit to look good and feel good and get a tax write off, but oh, I'm doing really good work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or billionaires who try to kind of shape the world in their view, right, through whatever policies that they think whatever money and influence that they can have. So we're moving into a world that is where the power truly lies in the people, but it's in the evolved consciousness of the people, and they will vote with their words and their thoughts, their hearts, and then that leads into more evolved action. So I see that the world in the future, and how far in the future, I don't know. I'd like to say 10 years, 20 years, but it could be a lot faster. It could be a lot longer, is moving into this like really, really beautiful place, right? Where the earth kind of heals itself through the conscious action of a tipping point of human beings. And what is that tipping point? 1% of the global population at this integrated level is probably sufficient, because the power of people vibrating at those higher levels of consciousness, universal love, it just absolutely overwhelms someone who's vibrating at the level of fear and greed or shame, right? So it's a logarithmic scale, and the power of that is incredible. And so the earth will heal. There's no amount of government agencies or United Nations and carbon credits and printing trillions of dollars to give this industry or that industry a leg up. That's not going to do anything, in my opinion. It's going to be the collective power of the conscious individuals, basically, who heal the planet and heal humanity. Now, that's the beautiful side. And that is true, and that will happen. It's a very decentralized world, but in a very loving space, and new ways of organizing will evolve out of that. The challenging side is that, like, we have several thousands of years of institutions that have been built and organized and have benefited from top-down power control, the paradigm of a small elite few having the expertise, knowledge, and guns and gold to rule or to serve. I'm taking a more positive view, the masses. And the masses, quite frankly, are quite happy on their own, but these other individuals and power structures take it upon themselves to to organize and serve them, which has led to all these nation states and the churches and these corporate structures. Those are all part of the old. And the energy of all those systems, not, the vast majority of them are negative and calcified, and also in that protector stage of development.
Mm.
And so they're very, very intent on protecting their status quo, protecting their territory. Look at, protecting their demography. Look at Russia taking over Ukraine, protecting their food supplies,
Mm.
and just not willing to rely on the resources and the ingenuity of just individual people figuring shit out.
Mm.
They think they've got to freaking top down it.
Mm-hmm.
And so those institutions are going to be creating a massive amount of chaos and dislocation and suffering as they clamor to maintain their relevance and significance in the next, X number of years, as humanity's consciousness grows up like a garden around them, So that's going to look like war, It's going to look like clamoring for energy sources. It's going to be a very fragmented and deglobalized world, contrary to what some people think. I don't see, what's happening, the push from the World Economic Forum. And I think that this whole, pandemic, which was miraculously timed, right the time when global demographics were turning around because of the baby boom. Literally, the baby boom expansion ended in 2020. Which means that all the capital that was flowing into the world from all the baby boomers in the most prosperous time that we know of in human history suddenly stopped and is turning around the other way. And now capital is being sucked out of the world. And the United States is decoupling from the Bretton Woods system of protecting all the trade lanes because it's got enough oil and enough energy, and it doesn't need the Middle East anymore. And so you're going to see this whole bifurcation and deglobalization, and now there's all these new alliances pop up, and that gets tricky when there's nuclear weapons, and we haven't, as a culture, as a society, a human society, learned how to move beyond the self-destructive tendencies and how to harness the incredible destructive power of energy. Right. So we're still at that kind of stage one civilization, which, is hypothesized that most civilizations don't get out of because they self-destruct themselves. So we're in a very, very challenging period. And my belief is that this time will be different because the consciousness is accelerating, right, on the positive side. And I believe that consciousness itself will overwhelm the negative tendencies, and we'll probably need another generation, right? We need to get, like, you look at American politics, you're like, are you serious? Like, are we really going to have two 80-year-old guys duking it out that nobody likes and nobody cares about, and they're so disconnected from the true reality, what's going on? It's like, come on, we can't do better than that. Well, we can't, because that institution has become one of those self-licking ice cream cones. They serve themselves. They don't serve the people anymore. And that's happening all around the world. So those old institutions are going to thrash like the bear in the corner, like Russia is right now. And they will lose, but they've got a lot of destructive power. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I think we're at. Like, wow, they say, may we live in interesting times. I'm sure that's in your I Ching somewhere.
You're right. Well, and so much of this is so much of the collapse of institutions and the kind of this whole energy that we're moving through is in some of the ancient planetary I Ching links and all that kind of stuff. And it feels
same with yoga philosophy.
Yeah.
The yoga philosophy talked about the darkest period was the Kali Yuga, and we came out of the Kali Yuga and came into the next age. Yuga means age, somewhere in the last 10 years. We can't really pinpoint it precisely, but
no. And so we've, within kind of human design and those kind of worlds, they sort of say 2027. But again, it's not a year where suddenly everything changes. It's this kind of feeling of this undercurrent of destabilization, particularly within the structures that are usually looked to keep us safe.
I did the human design. I thought that book was fascinating, or that movement, equating kind of the genetic code to the I Ching. And that's very, very powerful. That was interesting.
I studied with Ra for like 7 years. And so I'm one of the old guard of people who've had 20 odd years of experience within human design. So it's kind of, it has its limitations because it's a structure and it's a science. But for me, it's very kind of grounding in terms of I mean, it says what you say, like love
Mhm.
thyself, know
Mhm.
thyself, love thy neighbor. It's kind of, it's all the same when you get back to these ancient
Right.
philosophies. It's kind of like modern science is catching up to what they
Yeah, it's
knew.
like we
And
talked about earlier. They are a languaged structure to guide you toward the ultimate reality, which is beyond language. So
right,
so if human design works for you, that's awesome. If
right,
yoga works for you, that's awesome. If
yeah,
qigong or some sort
yeah,
of martial art works for you, it really is. Those systems are just there to kind of point the way. They're like trail markers on a trail.
yes,
And the
yeah,
guru tells you, or a teacher tells you where the trail is and give you some tools. And then if you wander off the trail, they'll say, turn right.
yes, yeah. But and then thank you for sharing your kind of perspective on what's happening, because I think it's very easy to fall into the negative camp in terms of, oh goodness,
Mhm.
the world is going to hell in a handcart. Particularly, I'm from Europe. I listen to my family talk about the energy crisis and watch the relative insulation in the US, and it's like we're living in two different worlds right now,
I
and it
know.
feels very
But people don't
decoupled.
recognize that just by buying into that story, you're supporting that system,
Yeah,
supporting those structures, because you're buying
yeah.
into the fear, and those systems feed off of fear.
Hmm. Hmm.
They feed off of fear. We saw
Mm.
that with COVID, and all this vaccine craziness, and now all the fear and all the judgment that was tossed upon people who are like just standing back and like, no, I kind of trust my body, right? I kind of trust my body and my immune system, so I don't need to be feared into getting a vaccine and everything. And now, the years, 2, 3 years later, all of a sudden, all this information is coming out. Said, wow, these vaccines have actually did not stop the spread of the COVID, actually doing a lot of harm. We've had at least 4 people drop dead of heart attacks for no apparent reason whatsoever.
Yeah.
And of course, the institutions are so corrupted that they won't even study it.
Hmm.
And so that's for me, and people, you could cancel me all day long if they want for saying this. I'm over it. I think that's a great example of what we're talking about.
Mm,
Consciousness, is can't be shut down as it
mm.
evolves. It can't, because it flows like air
Yes.
everywhere.
Hmm.
Whereas these structures try to shut down. They're like trying to plug a hole of a sinking ship with their thumbs
Right.
by shutting off this, pulling this article, or
Yeah.
telling Twitter to pull that person.
Yeah.
You can't stop truth.
No. And
Yeah,
it's especially when there are platforms these days where truth is just coming out, and then it's uncontrollable. And then
uncontrollable.
that's a good thing. And it
It is.
becomes like a groundswell of different opinion. And, I'd be really interested, because I think I contemplate fear and safety all the time. I'm, do somatic experiencing work. I'm always in the kind of felt sense of safety being the kind of cornerstone. I'd be really interested from your perspective. What's your kind of top tips for people who maybe don't know how to not tune into the fear frequency, don't know how to not be kind of led by the institutions and feel into, maybe I need to think about their narrative? What would you say if someone was coming to you thinking, how do I stop myself from just falling into fear?
Excuse me. First of all, the take it seriously that you can control everything that you need to control, which is your mind and your emotions and your body, right? And so, what does that mean? It means to slow down, and to
Mhm.
pause for at least 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening, and to do deep diaphragmatic breathing. We call it box breathing. Box breathing is the master key. It's the key that unlocks the door between the body and the mind and the spirit. It's the key that draws you inward. And the breath is consciousness, it is intelligence. And so when you slow down and begin to do conscious breathing through your nose with some controls, we recommend 5 count in, 5 count hold, 5 count in, out, 5 count hold, and do that as a 20-minute practice. Just start there. That's your meditation in the morning and the evening. So that has some profound effects on your body mind. First, it's arousal control. So it de-stresses you. It reopens up the parasympathetic pathway, which has been frozen shut from hyperarousal. It calms you down, and it calms your brain down, which then leads to more clarity. And in that clarity, you can see how fear and negativity is affecting you, and how it doesn't feel good, how it's leading you away from those things that you truly want, which are peace of mind and optimum health and more love in your life. And so when you have that kind of clarity and you're starting to feel that de-arousal, then you're like, okay, wow, when I interact in the world with network news, for instance, with people gossiping, with people obsessing about politics, with the doomsayers who say the world's about ready to collapse or explode or implode or whatever, then I get triggered and it reactivates those negative thinking patterns. And so I'm not going to engage with that anymore.
Mhm.
Well, I haven't had TV in my house for like 25 years.
Wow.
And I get my news by scanning Google News and playing opposite day and saying, okay, the headline says that. What's the opposite? And the truth is somewhere in between. It's fun,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
conversations like this, right? And
Mhm.
I fastidiously avoid negative people.
Mhm.
And I actively curate in my mind the positive vision for the future so that I can live that vision. I can be that vision.
Mhm.
Because remember, my world is my world, your world is your world. So if my world looks beautiful, then I get to live that vision. But of
Right.
course, I'm also a realist, and I know that at the Earth level, there's 8 billion minds at play here, all co-creating what this we call this experience.
Mm.
So I'm not powerful enough to think that if I just see a Garden of Eden, it's just going to appear in front of me. Wouldn't that be nice to have that kind of mental
Right. I
power?
wish I did have that magic
Yeah,
wand. Yeah.
but I do know that our thoughts influence that outcome.
Mhm.
And so I'm very fastidious with making sure that my thoughts are positive and I'm believing and I'm feeling it, and I'm
Right.
visualizing a positive future. And then
Mm.
I'm sharing that with other people,
Mhm.
through my podcast, through my books,
Mhm.
because man, there's nothing worse for the body mind than to be obsessed with negative thinking and fear, because
Right.
it not only does it really hurt you, it leads to sickness, illness, and death, but you trap yourself in prison. It literally is the difference between heaven and hell on earth.
Yeah.
Because you're basically saying, I'm going to create my world to be full of fear and negativity.
Mhm.
When I wake up in the morning, the world doesn't wake up to me. I wake up to a fearful world.
Yeah.
And then I stoke that energy of fear and negativity every time I engage in catastrophizing and fear mongering and listening to the news. I literally, the only time I see network news is when I travel, and I will literally just take a few glimpses at whatever they're blabbing about on CNN or Fox News, and I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, even that I feel the negative charge.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I don't know about you, but like if I ever catch it, like the colors and the whole visuality of it,
Oh,
it's
it's
actually
crazy.
it's meant to drive this
It's
kind of
meant to keep you distracted and attracted and addicted.
yes, and
And
that little ticker tape thing.
the speed of it is crazy. You see how fast the training of the mind in the past 20 years has been to like speed things up, to keep you even more and more distracted and
Mhm.
take your attention away from what's important to you, which is your
Mhm.
health and your positive mindset and this
Mhm.
positive
Mhm.
vision of the future. And so we have everyone's radically distracted and addicted to this kind of fast-paced media
Mhm.
that they're
Mhm.
constantly fed with, and all the messaging that goes into that subliminal messaging and the advertisements. It's all mental training.
Yeah.
I have a
Yeah.
saying with my tribe: if you're not training your mind, someone else is doing it for you, and the results will speak for himself.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good. Yeah. Well, and speaking about your tribe, so we've been very meta and heady and conceptual. What are you actually doing in the world right now? What's kind of your set? I know you have just tell our listeners about your Unbeatable Mind stuff and like all the things that you offer, because I'm really interested
Well,
in, okay,
like a
so how
lot
do
of
we practicalize this?
That's great question, because it's a good question. I mean, I'm going through transitions myself.
Hmm.
I have a business called Seal Fit, which I started in 2006, which is train physical and mental toughness, strong body, strong mind, strong teams. That out of that came my Unbeatable Mind training, because I was doing more than that, and I
Hmm.
wanted to do more than that. And so that
Yeah.
Unbeatable Mind is my whole philosophy of integrated development that we've largely been talking about. I've been trying to build a business around that, but I don't think the world's quite ready for it. It's been a hard slog, right? Should have been better off as a nonprofit even.
Right.
So I'm shifting my attention back to SealFit, which I think is the starting point. Because here's the thing: it's very hard to go to those higher stages of awareness if your body is broken, if you're out of shape, if you're really sick.
Hmm.
And if that's true, then your mind is not operating at its peak, because otherwise it
Hmm.
wouldn't be that way, right? When a
Hmm.
mind is healthy, the body's healthy. When a body's
Hmm.
healthy, the mind is healthy. This is embodied cognition. We can't separate ourselves from the body.
Hmm.
So I realized that, more and more people are obese and get, 50% of the, Western world is like suffering because they've literally been trained to ignore their body,
Hmm.
be obsessed with everything but their health, their body. And then to think that, this is why the medical system and the pharmacology system is so powerful, because
Yeah.
they keep on training us that, if something doesn't work, just go to the doctor. If something doesn't work,
Hmm.
just go take this pill. It's like, no, no,
Hmm.
no. The
Hmm.
reason it's not working is you're not thinking well and thinking positively. And
Hmm.
thinking positively and thinking well leads to eating well, leads to sleeping well, and leads to exercising and moving your body, like through qigong and tai chi, or yoga, or walking on the beach, or walking in nature, or
Hmm.
whatever.
Hmm.
And so I want to bring people back to that fundamental core truth: is, move your body, train your mind, move your body, and the rest will follow. So I'm energizing kind of SEAL Fit as a SEAL Fit 2.0. I'm looking at bringing some supplements and gear into the world. But that's kind of my Trojan horse. Once people
Hmm.
are into that and they're starting to
Hmm.
feel better, then naturally they're going to want to know what's next. And what's next is Unbeatable Mind. So I
I
have a,
love this. And I
yeah.
know you don't know me very well, but I'm a clinic director here and we're doing the same thing.
Are you?
So
Yeah.
I'm in the perspective of like the inner work, the consciousness, the actually being in community, all of those things. But that's not a sexy sell. And also
Right.
the world's not quite ready
They're not
for
quite rare.
that whole everything matters. It's a feedback loop of like evolving helixes of stuff. And I
Right.
get that. I see that. But I
Right.
also know that that's not translatable. And so we at Kuya, where I work, have just launched our kind of physical hardware, is what we're calling it, the hardware optimization, which includes all of the kind of it's almost genomics and bloods and getting the
Nice.
body
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
but also
Absolutely.
supplements and treatments and stuff like that, but enough infused into it of mindset, meditation,
Mm-hmm.
thinking, spaciousness, slowing down
Mm-hmm.
to ensure that we've got the foundations before we start doing the sexy stuff. I mean, we're licensed to do ketamine therapy here, but I'm
Right.
like, no, we're not doing it
Yeah.
until
Don't
we've
lead
got the
with that.
foundations.
Right.
Yeah, no,
Yeah. I love that.
and I have to hold that line. So talk about warrior of like,
Well, it's
no.
like, they found this out when they started bringing Buddhist psychology into therapy, that you have to be somebody before you can be nobody. And part
Mm,
of being somebody is to be in control of your body and your mind, and to have a strong foundation from
yes,
which to do the higher consciousness work from. So
yes,
this is why, the whole movement towards psychedelics, it's
hmm,
great for recovering from
yes,
addictions, and for veterans post-traumatic stress. Man, go straight there if you're about ready to kill yourself.
right.
But if you're a person who's looking at it as a hack or an optimization tool,
Hmm.
be careful,
Mm,
right? Now, just focus on making your body and your brain and your mind really, really strong, and you'll
mm,
find that psychedelics are nice aid for you, just to have a temporary experience of unity, or to have some healing
yeah,
opportunity because of some past memories that
yeah.
surface, and energy. And also, it
Hmm.
just opens your heart. Some people
Hmm.
just need that kind of crack open of their heart.
Mm, hmm.
So I
And
agree with what you're
yeah,
saying. Yeah,
and I think
foundation
when you're
first.
yeah, and you're focusing on your seal fit stuff, I kind of obviously our link was Michael Osterlenk, who will soon be
Hmm.
on this podcast and all this kinds of things. And he's
Right,
like
he's awesome.
in the seal fit stuff, and he's awesome and amazing. And he again, we're like anyone who's in this level of talking, we're all doing the complex, like everything stuff. And then we get back to realizing that we have to make it simple and we have to get the
Yeah,
foundations right because that's the scaffolding upon which everything else is built.
that's right. That's
Mm.
great. So that's where I am right now. And I'm
Yes.
working on another book, and I'm getting my doctorate to also build my foundation so I can better. My doctorate is in global leadership and change
Oh, I
at
love that.
Pepperdine. And so this will then form the foundation for me to come back at this higher level stuff
Yeah.
with a language of leadership development and
Hmm.
corporate, because I think corporations have a lot of leverage, right? And so if we can
Yes.
get corporations to operate at the integral level,
Hmm.
then there's, millions and millions of people who will be experiencing that in their work, as
Yes.
opposed to like through a program on their
Yes.
own.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And I
that's
think
where,
it's the biggest way we can influence. I think, sometimes we have to do a bit of the top down stuff, but from within the
yeah,
corporation level to like influence from the macro
right,
down to the micro. So but you
exactly.
say another book. How many books is this now? I was trying to look in your biography. I'm like, there's like 7 books here or something.
Yeah, I think that the one I'm working on is funny. It's like I've been working on it for 4 years.
Mm.
Just, it just wasn't ready to be birthed, I guess. So I'm going to get it out in next year. It's called Uncommon. And it was really speaking to younger generation,
Mm.
and it looks at what I call the 5 mountains of development: physical, mental,
Hmm.
emotional, intuitional, and spiritual, and give some
Mm.
practical ideas on how to really integrate and to be different in the world as opposed to just following the same path that maybe your parents did or someone else.
That's
And then
wonderful.
I've got a program that I developed, which was way ahead of its time, called the Exponential Mindset. And this
I
looks
was
at,
looking at that today. I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. So I
yeah,
was
this
like,
looks, I wish I could put this book out tomorrow. I literally just don't have the time. This PhD is
right.
kind of like interfered with things. This is probably going to be like a 2024-5 project.
Hmm.
And I was looking at the nature of reality strictly from mind. And
Mm.
so there's 5 minds:
Mm.
body mind, contextual mind, the strategic mind, the extended mind, and the integrated mind. And each one of those minds has different aspects and attributes that you can do to optimize it and to train it and then to integrate.
Mm.
It's a very powerful kind of extension of my 5 mountain, 5 plateau integrated development
Hmm.
philosophy. So this will be the
Hmm.
next evolution of that.
Mm. I love it. I love all of it. And it's
That's fun.
you've teased a lot of future stuff, but we will make sure all
Right.
the existing stuff is in our show notes so that people can find things and start to access.
Appreciate that.
And people really will find. It's not like, I think sometimes, I was guilty of this. We have this impression of this retired Navy SEAL, and it's all very kind of like, oh, we need to be in that zone. And none of your work is like that at all. I was very, very I found listening to the audiobook, actually, which was what I was doing. I was like, I was doing things differently as I was wandering around my house doing things. So it was
No,
a
that's
lovely
cool.
kind of experiential evolution for me.
That's
So
great.
yeah. Is there
Yeah, I
anything
think
else
the
you would
Navy
like to share
SEALs
with my
were just
listeners?
a powerful experience in my life,
Right.
and it does sell. Like my book, The Way of the SEAL, is the only one that has SEAL in the
In the
title.
title.
Actually,
Mm.
SEAL 8 weeks of SEAL Fit. Both of those came about because I had people ask me to write them.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? And it wouldn't have naturally written those, but I was the training program that I developed through SEAL Fit was having such a profound impact. Like 90% of the SEAL candidates that we train, they get through SEAL training, whereas
Yeah.
85% of everyone else is failing.
Right.
So there's like, wow, something's going on here. So
Right.
that became a book, 8 weeks of SEAL Fit, and then my
Hmm.
integrated movement practice became a book called
Yeah.
Kokoro Yoga. That's the
Hmm.
integration of yoga and breathing and meditation and martial arts and
Hmm.
functional fitness.
Hmm.
And the Way of the SEAL, I had Macmillan um, come to me and say, "Hey, we want to write a Navy SEAL leadership book." I'm like, "Okay, I'll do it, but it's got to be my way." You know
Your
what I mean?
way. Hmm.
Unbeatable Mind is my kind of self-published book where I'm like, this is just my philosophy, and I'm gonna. And so the next Uncommon is really the next sequel
Next step.
to Unbeatable
Hmm.
Mind.
Mm.
And then
Awesome.
Staring Down the Wolf was my book about developing teams and how to unlock the potential of a team. And the insight there, which kind of came out of my meditation, was that it's the leader who is holding back her teams or his teams.
Hmm.
And so the whole job of the leader is to do the work,
Yeah.
stare
And
down their fears, and
yeah.
overcome their shadow side and all the stuff that's holding the team back.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting and fascinating because we have a lot of conversations here about the leaders that we are. And I was looking at your compendium as this interview got on my calendar, and I was like, I saw the book Staring Down the Wolf and I was like, And so I've made our CEO like read it, and I was
Oh,
like,
awesome.
I need
Yeah.
to get into this because I'm now in a position of leading a team, and we actually are very much into Native American animals and all those sorts of things, and
Hmm.
we have different archetypes, and so having the wolf there speaks a little bit to us. And so I was like, I love this. I love the influences that are moving through your books in terms of all of these kind of the Zen history where you started, because it does
Right.
feel like that energetic difference, but it's not just your average leadership book, very much
Right.
so yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share with my audience today, Mark? I have valued so much this conversation, and I know that people will have
Likewise.
taken like inspiration from it. Is there anything else that's top of mind that you haven't said that you'd like to share before we close for the day?
I would just say that whatever you're looking for, the answer is within.
Hmm.
Stop looking for it outside of you.
Hmm.
You're never going to find it.
Mm-mm.
Whatever you find outside of you is a temporary salve. So learn to become less distracted. Take control of your body mind through the breathing practices and then begin to curate the qualities of stillness and pure presence, and the answers will then just reveal themselves to you. This is the master skill, and if we could get our culture to slow down and to begin to spend time in being instead of just doing, then you'll see even quicker acceleration of the evolution of consciousness.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us all today, Mark.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you very much, Victoria.
Thank you. I would just like to reiterate my thanks to Mark Divine. As I said in the introduction, that was not the conversation I expected to have, and yet it was such a rich conversation that physically left me feeling different by the end of it. I really hope that you listening have the same experience. I think that when leaders are not afraid to show up and stand by their beliefs and also embody all of them and everything that they speak about, something is pushed through the ether. And I think that's what happened, certainly to me when I conducted this interview, and I hope to you now that you've listened to it. As I said at the beginning, everything that Mark has produced is in the show notes, and all of his books are available right now, and you can get them very easily on Amazon. I will also link to the Unbeatable Mind and Seal Fit trainings and workshops and everything that's available on the interwebs. Please do go and listen to Mark's podcast. It is a wonderful demonstration of a lot of leaders who are doing very similar things in terms of no matter what the area or their expertise, they are standing by who they are, what they believe, and their consciousness and the frequency of love, which I think is what we're all trying to just emanate. So with that, all that's left to be said is that if you enjoyed this episode and got anything out of it, please subscribe to him, but most importantly, share this with someone who you think might benefit from listening to Mark's wisdom themselves. Thank you very much, and I will be with you next time here on the Unveil Podcast.